They said he killed the woman he loved, but her body was never found. 2 years behind bars, betrayed by a system that never asked why. Until he uncovered what really happened that night, and why. You ever hear a knock that didn't sound like a knock? Not the kind that says, "Hey neighbor," or even the sharp bang of an angry visitor. No, this was something else. It was slow, soft, precise. Like someone was counting the seconds between taps. Desmond hadn't slept in 2 nights. Not really. He'd been living in the garage behind his house, arms stained with grease and guilt, hoping that if he stayed busy enough, the silence wouldn't crush him. The car he was working on wasn't even a client's, just a rusted-out '72 Camaro that belonged to no one. A project he kept starting and abandoning depending on how the world treated him. The world lately had been cruel. His fiancée had been missing for 3 days. Not a text. Not a call. Her hospital ID still on the nightstand. Her toothbrush in its cup. The fridge still stocked with oat milk and frozen strawberries, her favorites. He went to the police the first night. They barely glanced at him. "She's an adult," the woman behind the desk had said, tapping her keyboard like his worry was an inconvenience. Maybe she needed space. He knew better. She wouldn't do this. Not to him. Not without a word. So when the knock came, Desmond hoped, for the first time in days. He wiped his hands on a rag and opened the front door. 3 people stood in the mist. 2 deputies, one young, buzzcut, trying too hard to look tough. The other older, heavier, eyes dull from too many night shifts. Behind them, the county sheriff leaned on a cruiser, arms folded, face unreadable. "You Desmond Blake?" the younger deputy asked. Desmond nodded, eyebrows furrowed. Did you find her?" The deputy didn't answer. He reached into his belt. "You're under arrest for the suspected murder of your fiancée." The words didn't register. Desmond blinked, waiting for the punchline. "Murder." His voice cracked. "What? No. She's not. She's just missing. She." The older deputy stepped forward and yanked his arms behind him. Cold steel clamped down on his wrists. The younger one started reciting rites. Everything slowed, warped, as if the air had thickened. His fiancée's coat was still hanging on the wall behind him, her scarf still looped through the sleeve. He stumbled as they pulled him toward the cruiser. Wait, what are you talking about?" The sheriff finally spoke, calm but flat. "There's blood on your porch. A lot of it. And neighbors say they heard screaming that night." Desmond's heart sank. No, that's not, she wasn't. But the words died in his throat as they shoved him into the back seat. He looked up, just long enough to see the yellow crime scene tape stretching across his porch. And that's when he saw it. The blood. A thick, dark smear across the wooden steps. Glinting under the porch light. A color that didn't belong in their world. His world. Desmond was booked just before sunrise. His shoelaces taken, his belt removed. His fingerprints rolled in black ink, then again digitally. The fluorescent lights above buzzed, too loud and too bright for a night that felt like a nightmare bleeding into morning. They put him in a holding cell with concrete walls and a steel toilet that didn't flush properly. No mirror, no clock, just the slow, maddening drip of a leaking pipe in the corner. He sat on the edge of the bench, head in his hands, still wearing his stained mechanic's shirt. His mind raced, not with thoughts, but with static. Everything felt unreal, like he was still in his garage, dreaming all of this while curled up on a pile of old seat covers. But the cuffs had been real. The blood was real. And the silence was worse than any accusation. When the detective came in, she didn't introduce herself. She just dropped a file on the table in the interview room and stared at him like she already knew the answers. "You and your fiancé got into a fight?" Desmond blinked. "No, she's been missing. I filed a report." She tilted her head. "Neighbors say they heard yelling. A woman's voice. Screaming." He leaned forward. "We weren't even home that night. She had a double shift at the hospital. I was in the garage the whole time." The detective flipped open the file. "You sure about that?" Inside was a photo. Blood on the porch. A broken flower pot. One of her sandals lying on the steps. Snapped at the strap. Desmond's throat went dry. "I didn't do this," he said, barely above a whisper. The detective didn't flinch. "There's blood in your house, too. Bathroom tile. Kitchen floor. Inconsistent cleaning marks. You tried to mop it up." "No, God, no, what are you talking about?" She leaned in. "You're not denying she's dead." Desmond froze. Dead? That word hadn't been said yet. Not officially. Not clearly. "But there's no body," he said. She stared at him. Cold. Still. There's enough blood to assume fatal injury, she said. Without immediate medical intervention, she wouldn't have survived. Assume. That word hung heavier than any accusation. They were building a case around a story they hadn't even proven. No body. No weapon. Just assumptions. Where's my lawyer? Desmond asked. She stood. You waived your right to counsel when you signed the form. I didn't sign anything. She paused. Looked back. Yes, you did. That's when it hit him. He had signed something earlier. Half asleep, hands shaking, eyes blurred. They told him it was to confirm he'd been booked. Told him nothing else. He just wanted it to be over. They tricked him. You're not going to get away with this, he whispered. But even as he said it, he didn't believe it. Because this wasn't a mystery to solve. This was a trap. And he'd walked right into it. It wasn't justice. It was a performance. The courtroom smelled like dust and old wood polish. The jury wore their best uncomfortable clothes. The bailiff kept glaring at Desmond like he'd already been sentenced. And the prosecution? They played their part to perfection. The lawyer called it a crime of passion, painting Desmond as an angry man with money problems, trust issues, and a violent streak. They mentioned how he lived alone, how he had no family, how he had a record from 15 years ago, a juvenile fight that didn't even involve the law, just a scuffle in a high school parking lot. But they used it. Pattern of aggression, they said. They talked about the blood, the kind of blood that suggested a deep wound, a head injury. They said Desmond waited too long to file the missing person report, that he failed to act like a grieving fiancé. They didn't mention how he drove to 4 different hospitals that night. They didn't mention that the only evidence tying him to the alleged murder was proximity and assumption. They didn't mention that her body had never been found. The defense attorney assigned to him, a middle-aged man with too many clients and not enough time. He didn't ask the hard questions. Didn't challenge the expert witness who based everything on a blood splatter photo. Didn't raise an eyebrow when the hospital couldn't confirm her shift that night because of a system error. Desmond kept looking at the jury, looking for a flicker of doubt. A crease in a forehead. A tilted head. Nothing. Their eyes were glazed over, like they were watching a documentary that confirmed what they already believed. By week 2, Desmond stopped hoping. He started preparing. He started wondering what prison would be like. What kind of cellmate he'd get. If he'd survived long enough for someone to believe him. When the verdict came, it didn't shock him. Guilty. The judge's voice was flat, like he was reading a grocery list. Desmond didn't flinch. He looked up once, at the courtroom full of people who used to wave at him on Sundays. Not one looked back. Prison doesn't hit you all at once. It creeps in. Quiet at first. Cold air. Steel doors that shut too loud. Plastic trays with food that tastes like cardboard and metal. The sound of 100 boots moving in sync, like an army of ghosts. Desmond learned the first rule within minutes. Don't make eye contact unless you mean it. The second rule came the hard way. Don't speak unless someone speaks to you first. He was assigned to bunk in a low-lit, overpopulated block with men who looked at him like prey, predator, or nothing at all. No in-between. His cellmate was an older man with faded tattoos and a scar that ran down his cheek like a crack in stone. He never gave his name. Never asked Desmond's either. Desmond didn't speak much anyway. He barely slept. The mattress was a sheet of foam thinner than his faith. Every night someone screamed. In pain, in anger, sometimes in prayer. Every morning, guards barked like drill sergeants, counting bodies like coins. The days blurred. He was assigned laundry duty. Whites from Block D, blues from Block A scrub. Fold. Stack. Repeat. It kept his hands busy. But his mind was a war zone. He thought about his fiancée. Every hour. Every breath. Her laugh. The way she used to tie her hair up when she was angry. The little scar on her chin from when she fell off a bike as a kid. Memories like shrapnel, sharp, random, and always hitting when he least expected. He tried to write her a letter once. Sat on his bunk, pen shaking in his hand. Got 3 words in. Then stopped. Because what do you say to someone the world swears is dead? On the 10th night, he found a Bible tucked under the bunk mattress. Not his cellmate's. Probably left by someone long gone. There was a name written inside. Not hers. But still, he opened it. A slip of paper fell out. On it, in barely legible handwriting. Watch your back. Don't trust the guards. And never talk about your case. Desmond stared at the message, his hands trembling. Someone had been here before him. and they wanted him to survive. It started with a whisper, not a sound, not a voice, a literal whisper, on a piece of paper, folded into a square no bigger than a matchbook. It showed up in the laundry cart, tucked between a stack of towels. White, ordinary, forgotten. Desmond almost didn't see it, but something about the way the corner stuck out caught his eye. He pulled it free, unfolded it slowly, like the act itself might set off alarms. There were only 3 words. She's not dead. His heart stopped. There was no name, no handwriting he recognized. Just those 3 words, written in pencil, shaky and uneven, like whoever wrote it didn't want to be seen. He read it again, and again. She's not dead. The first reaction was anger. Some cruel joke. Some twisted inmate playing games. Someone had seen his trial on TV, heard the whispers, and decided to mess with him. But then a second O came. 2 days later. This one wasn't hidden. It was handed to him, quietly, quickly, by one of the kitchen workers during lunch. No eye contact. No hesitation. Just a folded napkin passed hand to hand in the shuffle of the food line. Inside, she's alive. You were never meant to survive this. Desmond nearly dropped his tray. He stuffed the napkin into his waistband and ate nothing that day. Just sat at the table, staring into space, stomach turning, mind spinning. Who knew? How did they know? And if it was true, why? That night, he waited until the lights dimmed and the guards passed by. Then he unfolded both notes and read them again, under the faint light from the hallway. He couldn't sleep. Not with that echoing in his skull. She's alive. You were never meant to survive this. The questions piled up faster than he could breathe. Had someone faked her death? Why? Why frame him? Was she hiding? Was she scared? Was she complicit? Desmond sat on the edge of his bunk until the sun rose, numb, shaking, and more awake than he'd ever been. Because if there was even a chance she was alive, that meant he wasn't crazy. That meant he had a reason to fight. And that meant someone, somewhere, was terrified he might find the truth. It happened by accident. The prison day room had a busted TV mounted in the corner. Old, flickering, permanently stuck on the local news station. Most guys ignored it. Too much bad news in one place. Weather updates, political nonsense, crime reports that made them all feel smaller. Desmond never paid attention to it either. Until he heard her name. The anchor was reading a list of anonymous tips the police were investigating in a missing persons case. Not his. Not officially. But the screen flashed to a short segment of a vigil, something held by the hospital staff. Candles. Posters. A photo of her, his fiancée, taped to the podium. And behind it all, a woman walking past the camera. It was a blurry image. Just a second. Maybe 2. But he knew that hair. That walk. That habit she had of turning her head slightly when someone laughed nearby. Desmond shot to his feet. Other inmates glanced over. He didn't care. He walked to the screen, slowly, pretending to be casual. Inside, his chest was hammering. The clip replayed 5 minutes later. There she was again. Same figure, same face. Eyes hidden behind sunglasses. A hood pulled over her head. But it was her. He would have bet his life on it. She was alive. She was there. And no one had seen her. Not the news anchors. Not the cops. Not even the hospital staff. Because everyone believed she was dead. No one was looking for her anymore. And that's exactly what she or someone wanted. That night, Desmond couldn't eat. Desmond had never been the type to ask for help. But prison rewrites your instincts. It teaches you to listen more than you speak, and notice things most people overlook. Like who controls the contraband, who fixes things without tools, who somehow has access to information that shouldn't exist inside concrete walls. There was one guy, quiet, reclusive, but oddly respected by both inmates and guards. He worked in the library. They called him the clerk. No one knew his real name. He didn't care for small talk. But he had a reputation. If you wanted to find something, he could get it. Articles, photos, even access to the prison's forgotten, never audited email system used by volunteers. Desmond waited until they were alone, shelving paperbacks no one read. I need to see an email account, he said, voice low. An old one. The clerk didn't stop stacking books. Why? Because I think someone I loved faked her own death. And the only thing she ever kept private from me was her email. That made him pause. The clerk turned, studied Desmond for a long beat, then said, username. Desmond gave him what he remembered. a mix of her nickname and birth year. He didn't expect much. But 2 days later, a manila folder was left in Desmond's laundry cart. Inside, 5 printed emails from the account. All drafts. None had been sent. But one stood out. It was dated the morning after she vanished. It read, "I don't think I can do this. I'm scared. He doesn't know. He's not supposed to. But I saw the file. If I disappear, it's not his fault. Please don't blame Desmond." His breath caught in his throat. He read it again. And again. It wasn't addressed to anyone. Just sitting there, unsent. Like she had written it in a panic, then vanished before hitting send. The others were short, fragmented. Like notes to herself. One mentioned a payment. Another referenced someone watching her. The last one? It just said, "They told me Desmond wouldn't make it past trial." Desmond's knees went weak. Someone had planned for him to go down. They didn't just want her gone. They needed him out of the picture too. And now he had proof that someone else knew. But he had no idea who, or how far this went. New inmates usually came in broken. Shoulders hunched. Eyes darting. Voices low. It didn't matter if they came in shouting on day 1. By week 2, everyone learned the same lesson. Keep your head down, or someone will take it off. But this one was different. He walked into the block like he owned it. Not like a tough guy, no puff chest or trash talk. Just calm. Collected. Like none of this was new to him. Like orange jumpsuits and steel bars were part of his wardrobe. Desmond noticed immediately. The man was clean-cut. Even his prison-issued clothes looked pressed. He had the kind of face that wouldn't be out of place in a boardroom. Sharp jaw, smooth hands, eyes too observant for someone new. They assigned him to Desmond's block. 3rd bunk from the corner. He didn't speak much the first few days. But on the 5th night, just after lights out, Desmond found a folded note on his bedroll. "I know who she really is." No name. No explanation. Just that. The next morning, Desmond waited until the new inmate sat alone in the cafeteria. He approached cautiously, sat across from him. "You left a note," Desmond said. The man didn't look up from his tray. "Maybe." Desmond kept his voice steady. "What do you know?" He finally met Desmond's eyes. "Enough to know you're not crazy. And enough to know we shouldn't talk here." Desmond hesitated. Then when? A pause. Then, tonight. Library. Left aisle, 3rd row. That night, Desmond slipped away during cleaning duty. Made his way to the library. The one place the guards rarely hovered unless something broke. He found the man already waiting, flipping through a book on forensic psychology. "You said you know who she is." The man nodded. "I knew her before you did. Not well, but enough to know she wasn't who she claimed to be." Desmond frowned. "You're saying she had another identity?" "She had 3, the man replied. "And only one of them was legal." Desmond's stomach dropped. "She was running," the man continued. "From her past. From people with long reach. The kind of people who don't care who they burn to keep a secret." "Why didn't she just tell me?" Desmond whispered. The man looked at him, almost with sympathy. "Because you were never supposed to be part of the story. You just got too close." Desmond's mind reeled. "Who are you?" he asked. The man stood up, book still in hand. "Someone who used to work on the other side of the glass," he said. "And someone they locked up the second I stopped playing along." Before Desmond could ask anything else, the man walked off. Left Desmond standing there with 1,000 questions, and one terrifying realization. This wasn't just a missing person case. This was a cover-up. And he was the only one left who wasn't supposed to survive it. The man from the library never gave Desmond his name, but he left something behind. A torn page from an old yearbook. Faded. Yellowing. At first glance, it looked ordinary. Just a row of smiling seniors posed awkwardly in their caps and gowns. But Desmond's eyes went straight to her. Not the woman he'd proposed to. Someone younger. Softer. Darker hair. Different last name. Same eyes. Same mouth. Same subtle scar above the left eyebrow. Under the photo, a name he'd never heard before. It wasn't the name she'd used when they met. It wasn't the name on her hospital ID. It wasn't the name plastered across every headline that accused him of murder. It was a name that no longer existed, at least not legally. Desmond sat in his bunk, the photo clutched in his shaking hands. He whispered her real name to himself, again and again, testing it, tasting it. It sounded like a secret finally surfacing after being buried for too long. Later that night, he returned to the library. But the man in the suit was gone. Transferred, they said. Just like that. No warning. No reason. And the guards? They avoided eye contact when Desmond asked questions. One even muttered something about orders from up top. That's when it hit him. This wasn't a coincidence. The man had warned him, hinted at something bigger, and now he'd been vanished. Desmond couldn't prove it, but every bone in his body screamed the same truth. Someone was watching. Someone who didn't want that name spoken again. He hid the yearbook page inside the spine of a forgotten novel, one no one ever checked out. Then he went back to the note the man had given him days ago. He flipped over. Tiny writing, barely visible. A website URL. One he'd never seen before. He'd need help to access it. The kind of help that required favors, risks, sacrifices. But Desmond didn't care anymore. Because that forgotten name? It was the first piece of proof that the woman he loved wasn't who she claimed to be. And whoever had helped her disappear wasn't finished yet. Favors cost more in prison than they ever did outside. Desmond traded his only warm hoodie for 5 minutes on a restricted system, an old, dust-covered terminal meant for educational modules. But with the right tweaks and a quietly bribed tech-savvy inmate, it became a portal. He typed the URL from the back of the note. At first, nothing. Just a blank page. Then a file opened. No title. No watermark. Just a transcript. Interview log, confidential. Subject, private confession, March 18 to 10:42 p.m. Location, undisclosed county sheriff's office. Witness, redacted. Desmond's blood ran cold as he read the first line. I wasn't supposed to be there that night. She called me. Said she was scared. Said someone had found out. The voice wasn't his. It wasn't even close. But the details were chillingly accurate. Specific references to the night his fiancée vanished, to the porch, to the same broken flower pot that was later used as evidence against Desmond. I didn't mean for it to happen like that. But she ran. I panicked. I didn't kill her. She's not dead. She just disappeared. I helped. Desmond stopped breathing. A confession. Someone else had admitted to being there. Admitted involvement. Even acknowledged that she was alive. But this transcript had never been presented in court. It wasn't in the discovery. Not in the trial. Not even hinted at by his underpaid, overworked defense attorney. It had been buried. Swapped out. Replaced by a cleaner story. One where Desmond fit the narrative better. He scrolled to the end of the document. No signature. No name. Just a closing note. He'll never survive trial. You know that. This is the only way to close it clean. Desmond's vision blurred. This wasn't just neglect. This was deliberate. Someone knew the truth. Someone had heard that confession, watched the evidence surface, and chose to bury it. He printed the transcript, hid it in the same hollow book that held her yearbook photo, then sat on his bunk for hours, fists clenched, heart pounding. He'd been right all along. She was alive, and someone had confessed. But instead of justice, they handed him a sentence. All to close it clean. The air was too still. Desmond felt it before he saw anything. Like the weight of the prison shifted. Tension had been building for weeks. A guard beat an inmate in the showers. Kitchen portions were cut in half. Mail was delayed. Visits canceled without reason. Then came the lockdowns, short at first, then longer, until they blurred into full days behind steel. It only took a spark. That spark came during lunch. An argument between rival blocks turned into a shove. Then a tray flew. A punch. Another. A scream. And suddenly the entire cafeteria erupted. Desmond ducked as a chair was hurled overhead. Guards swarmed in, shouting, swinging batons, radios squawking in panic. Inmates scattered or fought back, choosing flight or fury. Desmond didn't move with them. He moved under them. He dove low, crawled through the chaos, past overturned tables, through the gap in the guard line, toward the East Hall, toward the administrative wing. It was insane. No inmate ever got that far without being stopped. But everyone was distracted, and Desmond had planned for this. He only needed 5 minutes. He reached the locked utility corridor and pried open the vent cover behind a trash bin, something the clerk had quietly mapped out for him weeks ago. Inside, the vent was tight, hot, suffocating. But it led to a forgotten janitor's closet just outside the warden's office. The place was dark, empty. He moved fast. Inside the warden's office, he didn't look for weapons. He looked for files. Specifically case logs. Restricted evidence. Anything connected to his name or hers. Most files were digital, password locked. But on the back shelf was a safe. Old school. Combination lock. Dusty. Exactly what someone would use for something they didn't want found by IT. Desmond didn't have the code. But he had been a mechanic his whole life. He could feel tension. He knew how to listen to metal breathe. 3 numbers. He held his ear close, turned slowly. Click. The door creaked open. Inside, folders. Thick, unlabeled. One had his case number on it. Another, her real name. But there was more. A thumb drive. Unmarked. Hidden beneath a stack of cash. He grabbed it all. Then ran. He didn't make it back to his cell. They found him in the hallway. Tackled him. Beat him. Dragged him back with a dislocated shoulder and a busted lip. But they didn't find the files. He had hidden them behind a loose tile in the janitor's closet before he'd left. Later, in solitary, bruised and bleeding, Desmond smiled for the first time in months. Because for the first time since that knock on his door, he wasn't just surviving. He was fighting back. The thumb drive was a relic. Old. Scratched. Looked like it had been buried under paperwork for years, and maybe it had. But Desmond knew better than to judge by appearances. The hard part was getting it read. Technology in prison was limited. Access to computers was monitored, firewalled, filtered. But if you knew who to ask, and if you had something to trade, things became possible. Desmond traded 2 weeks of food trays and every painkiller they'd given him after the riot. In return, the clerk delivered a borrowed laptop. 15 minutes. No questions. Desmond plugged in the drive. It were to life. There was only one file on it. Footage_03_16_ext.mp4. He double-clicked it. The video opened. Grainy, black and white. Static lines cutting across the screen. It was a surveillance camera, mounted high, facing the front of his house. Desmond's breath caught in his throat. There she was. His fiancée. Alive. Walking out the front door. No panique. No blood. No signs of injury. Just walking. Calm. Hoodie pulled over her head. A bag slung across her shoulder. She paused at the edge of the porch. Looked behind her once. Then walked out of frame. Timestamp. 11:04 p.m. The same night she was reported missing. The same night the police claimed there was a struggle. Blood. A fight to the death. But the footage told a different story. There was no struggle. There was no murder. She left. On her own. Desmond stared at the screen, heart pounding, brain spinning. This tape was the missing piece. The one thing that proved everything he'd been saying since day one. They'd known. Someone had this all along. Someone buried it. And whoever did it didn't care if an innocent man spent his life in prison. Desmond saved a copy of the file on a second drive, one that the clerk promised to smuggle out through a volunteer mail program. If it reached the right person, maybe, just maybe, it could force the world to look again. He sat alone that night, listening to the hum of the vents above him. For the first time, he had proof. Not a theory. Not a feeling. Proof. She was alive. And he wasn't crazy. They were. The legal system moves slower than grief. Desmond had already spent over a year inside. 137 nights without sleep. 137 mornings waking up to a reality that still didn't make sense. Until the letter came. It wasn't from a state. Not from his public defender, who had long stopped responding. It came folded in quarters, no envelope, slid under his cell door during mail call. No name. Just a sentence. I saw the footage. Let's talk. At first, Desmond didn't believe it. But 2 days later, a name appeared on his visitor log. A name he didn't recognize. He was escorted to the visitation room and found a woman already waiting on the other side of the glass. She looked like the storm she had walked through to get here. Hair in a loose braid, blazer wrinkled at the collar, dark bags under her eyes. Not young, not old, but something about her posture screamed tired of fighting, but still swinging. She picked up the phone before he could even sit. I used to be a defense attorney, she said. I was disbarred 3 years ago for exposing a falsified confession in a trafficking case. They buried me for it. Desmond hesitated, then sat. Why are you here? Because someone sent me a flash drive in the mail. No return address. Just your name written in black marker. She looked at him carefully. I saw what they hid. I saw her walk out that door. Desmond's throat tightened. She's alive. I know. They stared at each other, the noise of the prison fading into the background. I filed a motion to reopen your case, she said. based on newly discovered evidence and prosecutorial misconduct. But you should know it won't be clean. They'll fight it. They'll try to discredit the footage. Say it was edited. Say it doesn't prove where she went or why. Desmond nodded slowly. I don't care. She leaned closer. Then let's burn it down. Her voice was quiet, but it held fire. We'll start with the chain of evidence. Who handled your case? What got omitted? I'll need everything you've collected, emails, transcripts, the name she used before. I have it, he said. She paused. And if we win? What happens if she shows up? What do you want? Desmond looked away, jaw tight. I want the truth to be louder than the lie. The motion was filed under seal. The lawyer, now Desmond's only real ally, knew the game well enough to play quietly. She didn't alert the local press. Didn't chase headlines. She filed the motion like a ghost, carefully, methodically, attaching the surveillance footage, the transcript of the buried confession, and photos of the yearbook ID. Still, it sent shockwaves. Within a week, prison staff started treating Desmond differently. Colder. No more Blake laundry. Now it was inmate, barked without eye contact. By the second week, he was moved to a different cell block for his protection. But he wasn't scared. Not anymore. Because, behind the scenes, the wheels were turning. A court date was granted, preliminary, but enough to breathe. Enough to put the state on notice. Enough to force them to explain why a man had been convicted without a body, while key evidence was conveniently misplaced. His lawyer laid it out for him during a short visit. I can push for a retrial, she said. I can build a real defense this time. But we'd be playing by their rules. It'll take months. Maybe years. Desmond nodded slowly. And the other option? She met his eyes. Public pressure. We take outside. Expose everything. Go to the press. Make noise. Get loud enough that they have to reopen the case. Because the whole country's watching. Desmond leaned back, hands clenched. Retrial meant dragging this out. Quietly. Respectfully. Playing nice. But going public? That meant putting everything on the line. His face. His story. Hers. And if she was hiding, it would drag her out too. Do you want to find her? The lawyer asked softly. Desmond's answer came slow. I want the world to know I didn't kill her, he said. I want every person who stopped looking me in the eye to know they were wrong. I want every person who buried that tape to burn with it. Silence. Then she slid a small recorder across the table. Then say it, she whispered. On tape. Your story. Your words. Start to finish. He stared at it for a moment, then picked it up, and spoke. For the first time, not to a judge, or a cop, or a lawyer, but to the world. The interview went viral within hours. It started on a niche justice reform podcast, then hit Reddit, then Twitter, then late-night TV. A man convicted without a body. A hidden confession. A surveillance tape buried for over a year. It was the kind of story that made people angry, and made them look. Desmond's voice, calm, tired, raw, hit a nerve. The public wanted blood, but not his this time. Within 3 days, #FreeDesmondBlake trended across every platform. And on the 5th day, she appeared. Not in person, not in court, but on a live stream. The video popped up with no announcement. A woman, hooded, sitting in a dimly lit room. Her face was in shadow, but her voice, Desmond would have known it anywhere. My name is Elise. And yes, I'm alive. The world froze. She took a shaky breath and continued. I know what people think. That I faked it. That I set him up. That I ran. The truth is, I didn't plan any of this. I didn't want him hurt. I never imagined it would go this far. Desmond sat in his cell, listening to every word as the prison staff scrambled in the hallway outside. For once, the guards weren't barking orders. They were watching too. I disappeared because I was scared, she said. Not of Desmond. Never him. But of the people who found out who I really was. She told them everything. How she had entered witness protection as a teenager. How her father had been part of a federal case involving political corruption and trafficking. How she changed her name 3 times. How she had finally started a new life and fallen in love with Desmond. But someone from that past found me. Left a message in my locker. My photo in my mailbox. I was told to disappear quietly, or Desmond would be the one to pay. Her voice cracked. They told me if I stayed, he'd be dead within a week. They promised me no harm would come to him if I just walked away. Then came the detail that broke Desmond. They sent someone to clean the scene, to make it look like something had happened. I didn't know until it was too late, until he was arrested. And by then, I was buried under a new name again. She paused. To Desmond, if you're watching this, I never stopped loving you. I never stopped praying someone would find the truth. Then the screen cut to black. Just like that. No location. No date. But it didn't matter. She had spoken. She had confirmed it all. Desmond sat frozen in his bunk, head in his hands, heart hammering. She was alive. She had loved him. And she had been used just like he had. But now the world knew. And the people who had pulled the strings? They were next. The Department of Justice released a statement 2 days after the livestream. They claimed Elisa's video was under review, that new and compelling information had been submitted, that they would investigate the possibility of procedural misconduct in the case of Desmond Blake. But it was already too late to control the story. Desmond's lawyer had received an anonymous leak, emails, dozens of them, communications between federal agents, a regional prosecutor, and a private security firm. The dates matched Elisa's disappearance. The subject lines were clear. Subject, compromised. Media suppression, request approved. Package, relocated. Frame, narrative in progress. Desmond read every word, his stomach twisting tighter with each click. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't just a rogue cop or a corrupt judge. It was organized. The people from Elisa's past, the ones she was running from, had never let her go. When they learned where she was, they didn't want to kill her. That would have made noise. Headlines. Investigations. No. They wanted her to vanish. Quietly. Cleanly. And Desmond? He was never supposed to be part of the story. But love is messy. Unexpected. And when Elise refused to abandon him without warning, they used it. They staged the scene. Poured animal blood across the porch. Shattered glass. Took her sandal and broke it in half. Then manipulated a system that was already too eager to convict a man without power, without money, without the right connections. One of the emails was especially cruel. Boyfriend's a gift. No one will question it. Guy fits the profile. Blue collar. Isolated. No family. Let's wrap this in 48 hours. Desmond stopped breathing. They didn't just let him be framed. They chose him. Because he was easy. Disposable. Forgettable. He wasn't just collateral damage. He was a chess piece. And they never expected the piece to fight back. The courtroom was full. Not just with journalists, bloggers, podcasters, and out-of-town attorneys, but people. Regular people. Black, white, rich, poor. Formerly incarcerated. Mothers. Daughters. Men who saw themselves in Desmond. Women who had disappeared into systems and come back changed. The preliminary hearing had turned into something else entirely. A reckoning. The motion wasn't just about Desmond anymore. It had grown teeth. Elisa's statement, the confession transcript, the hidden video footage, and the buried emails had opened doors the justice system tried to keep shut. The state tried to suppress it, claimed it was unverified, that Elisa's identity hadn't been confirmed, that the confession was hearsay, that the footage was taken out of context. But the judge had no choice. Too many eyes were watching. Desmond sat in the courtroom, wearing a clean shirt for the first time in 2 years, handcuffed but upright. His lawyer sat beside him like a general in the final battle. Across the aisle sat state officials, red-faced and flustered. One had already resigned. Another was placed on leave, pending investigation. When the judge called the hearing to order, the air was tight. Desmond's lawyer rose. I submit that not only was my client wrongfully convicted, but he was intentionally framed as part of a coordinated effort to silence a protected witness. One who, until recently, the government claimed was dead. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. The evidence spoke louder than any accusation. Video clips were shown. Emails read aloud. Photos of Desmond's bruises. His fiancée's yearbook ID. Her own recorded confession. The courtroom sat in stunned silence as the picture came into focus. This wasn't just about Desmond. It was about a system that knew he was innocent and chose to sacrifice him anyway. The state's representative stood at the end, voice trembling, trying to maintain control. There is no definitive proof that the woman in the video is the same Elise Hartman who was reported missing. Until we can verify. A voice cut through the courtroom. Clear. Sharp. Unmistakable. She's me. Everyone turned. A woman stood at the back of the room. No hood. No glasses. No shadows. just a scar above her left eyebrow, and a fire in her eyes. It was her, alive, and no longer hiding. The courtroom was silent, the kind of silence that comes after a scream, when there's nothing left to deny. She stood at the back, trembling but defiant. No disguise, no prepared statement, just her name. My name is Elise Hartman. I am alive, and Desmond Blake did not hurt me. The judge had no script for this. Neither did the prosecutor. For 2 years, they had maintained a narrative built on assumptions, staged evidence, and silence. And now the woman whose death had been the cornerstone of their case stood alive, breathing, breaking every lie with every word. She walked to the front slowly, heels clicking like punctuation marks in a story that was finally being rewritten. I lied, she said softly, facing the courtroom. I let them make him the villain. Because I was afraid. Because I believed them when they said he wouldn't survive if I stayed. She turned to the judge. I'm here now, not to fix everything, but to stop hiding. The judge exhaled, finally looked Desmond in the eye. There is no justification, he said, voice heavy, for what happened to you, but I can give you back what should have never been taken. Gavel in hand, all charges against Desmond Blake are dismissed. Just like that, the cuffs were removed. The room erupted. Some cried, some clapped, others just watched, frozen, unsure how to process a system admitting it had failed. Desmond didn't move. He just stood there, breathing. No chains, no accusations, just breath. His lawyer hugged him. Cameras flashed. Reporters surged forward. But Desmond didn't care about any of that. He looked across the aisle, at her, at the woman he'd once planned to build forever with. Their eyes met. No smiles. No anger, just recognition. She gave him a soft nod. And then she walked away. No apology could make up for what they'd lost. But her truth had saved him. And that was enough. They offered him money. A settlement. A quiet check. A promise not to sue in exchange for a sum that made Desmond's lawyer laugh out loud. He didn't take it. Not at first. He didn't want their money. He wanted their silence broken. And when the state issued a formal apology, on camera, signed and sealed, then he accepted. But the money didn't fix anything. It didn't give him back the 2 years he lost. The business he built from scratch. The friends who disappeared when he needed them most. And it didn't fix his heart. So Desmond did something no one expected. He disappeared. He changed his name, not to hide, but to start over. A quiet, coastal town. A small garage tucked behind a diner. No signs. No ads. Just word of mouth and engines humming under his hands again. Sometimes people recognized him. Not always. But sometimes a customer would pause, squint, then ask, "Hey, are you that guy?" Desmond would smile faintly. "I used to be." And that was enough. He didn't follow the case after that. Didn't watch the trials that followed when former officials were charged. Didn't read the articles about the prosecutor who lost his license, or the agent who confessed to falsifying records. He didn't even follow what happened to Elise. But one day, months later, he found a postcard in his mailbox. No return address. Just 3 words. Thank you for surviving. He kept it tucked behind the counter, right next to a framed photo of his old garage, the one before everything fell apart. Now every time a young kid walked in with oil-stained hands and dreams in their eyes, Desmond offered them a job. Not because he needed the help, but because he understood something now. Sometimes the best revenge is healing so loudly the world can't ignore it.